So verses 1 through 4 are all connected. This will be rules or laws in the nation of Israel governing marriage and divorce and remarriage. When a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. All right. So there's a condition that had to be met before he gave her a divorce, that she had some uncleanness in his eyes, in her no favor in his eyes, no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her. What exactly that uncleanness was defined as was widely argued. And that was one of the questions the Pharisees gave to Jesus in their days. Can a man put away a wife for any reason? Because some of the Pharisees held the position that, if she doesn't cook well, if she puts too much salt on your food, then that was sufficient reason. And so Jesus answered the question that saved for fornication. So that would be your uncleanness of what it actually meant. So this idea of giving her a bill of divorcement is really protective of the wife. Think about in just general culture, if a guy said that he was done with his wife and just left her, then she's left really kind of in a lurch of what is her status. Is she single? Is she abandoned? Can she remarry? And so this forces him that if he's going to take this action, to make it public, to make it plain, and it gives her the proof of what he's done, and not allowing him to continue to have her stay there. So it's both a legal separation on paper. That bill of divorcement is literally something he has to do it. It's not just telling you I'm divorced, but no, you are, and you have to physically give it to her. So she's got documentation of it, and then she goes on her way. He couldn't hold her hostage or captive or anything of that nature. And then she had the freedom to find a new husband. Okay? Any question on that? If the latter husband hate her, all right, is this a painter husband? He needs a ladder? It means the second husband. So she goes and finds a new husband, and she's remarried. If he hates her and puts her away, gives her a bill of divorcement and give it in their hand and sendeth it out of her house, or if the latter husband die, so you got two scenarios where she is now single again, which took her to be his wife, so that second husband, her former husband, that means the first guy who had already divorced her, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife after that she is defiled, for that is abomination before the Lord. And thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. So one of the conditions upon divorce was that, if she goes and remarries, this is permanent. There's no take-backsies. There's no buyer's remorse. Well, let's just get back together. That if she was your wife and you had the opportunity to keep her that way, that's what you should have done, not trying this ring around the rosy thing after you've changed your mind, after she's had a new husband. So an abomination is something that's described as disgusting, that this is not good in the Lord's eyes. Thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. So the idea that one individual's sin had an impact on the nation and on the land on a broader scale. Okay? Questions?
So this is what they're referencing in Matthew 19, but then Jesus responds and makes it even more narrow, right?
About
reasons for divorce, because it seems a lot broader here than it does. Right?
I think he is explaining what the uncleanness was, what it meant, as opposed to what they had been teaching, save for the cause of fornication. But in the beginning, it was not so. He made them man and female. And what God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. But it was a hotly debated point amongst the various groups and factions and rabbis. All right, verse 5. A different aspect of marriage. So we've got a new marriage. When a man hath taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home 1 year, and shall cheer up his wife which he hath taken. Now, let's get this straight. This not charged with any business, that doesn't mean he doesn't have to go out in the fields and work. That means the nation is not going to impose additional duties or burdens, road work. At one point, Solomon had these massive logging crews, or they're bringing in work for the temple. And so any of those additional civic works or responsibilities, you're exempt from. The most big would be going to war. So you've got a 1 year where you are to, focus on your domestic affairs, and most particularly cheering up your wife.
Doesn't this, when he's putting the separation in the army, you got a new house, go home.
That's right.
Go home.
That was the instructions for the general to ask the questions. Is anybody, recently married, new house, new vineyard? You are excused from service. Go home. And then the next question was, who's scared? You go home too. So good connection, Connor. Verse 6, no man shall take the nether or the upper millstone to pledge, for he taketh a man's life to pledge. All right, how many here are millers? Me neither. But if you drive down the road, you see these round circles of stone with these grooves cut in it, and you're like, why is that sitting there? Well, because somebody used to use that thing. Have these two big stones, and they'd sit together, and they'd have something powering it where it would spin. You put your grain in there, and it would squish it, and that's how you would produce flour. That's right. So, if I have two stones, and I have grain in it, and I'm turning it, I can produce flour. If I take away one of those stones, how much flour can I produce? None. Does it matter if I take the top or the bottom? No. All right. So, the nether would be your bottom stone. The upper stone, obviously the top one. It says, when you're taking collateral for a loan, you cannot take those two things because you have just made that miller unable to work. A miller without a millstone is just Bob. I mean, he can't work. And so if that's his means of earning money, he has no hope of paying you back. And so in that sense, it's like you're taking a man's life. You're taking his livelihood, his ability to earn money. So this is putting limits on what is deemed to be acceptable collateral. Because it's not just I have an interest in that stone. When they talk about taking a pledge, that means I physically go and take possession. Okay? So I loan you $100. I'm going to take possession of your pickup truck until you give it back. You are strongly incentivized to give me back the money, right? In the meantime, you're walking. Well, if I've taken your millstone, you have no way to pay me back. And so it's kind of self-defeating. Okay?
I found $100. I just wait for Patrick to find something else.
Isn't it like
I'm not
putting
giving
somebody
you
in jail for being in debt?
The concept of debtor's prison, how are they going to pay? Generally, you're incentivizing their family members to pay it. Or you're waiting for some rich family member to die off so that they can have an inheritance and then pay you. But it could get dark. There's some whole Dickens novels about that. But there's no pattern for, the pattern and back in this day was primarily that if you couldn't pay your debts, that you would sell yourself as an indentured servant. All right. Verse 7. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and making merchandise of him, or selleth him, then the thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. Remember, God made a distinction between those who are part of Israel and those who are not. When they went out to war and conquered cities, those captives became their servants, and those were lifetime servants, and they could buy and sell them. That was what was going on. But within Israel, as a citizen of Israel, you had additional rights. And so if you sold yourself voluntarily as an indentured servant, after 7 years, you were free. They couldn't hold you indefinitely. This individual is someone who is taking Hebrews and then selling them, whether they were indentured to begin with or whether they were free. He's taking them and he's selling them as permanent slaves, and that's described as being a thief. This is more akin to what we saw in like the African slave trade, where you're going and taking people and you're going and selling them for life. And so that, as far as the citizenship status of the Israelites, this was a capital crime. If you tried to do that, your life was forfeit. That person was described as a thief. They would be executed. Then thou shalt put evil away from among you. Okay. Verse 8. Take heed in the plague of leprosy. Pay attention, y'all. Right? That's what Moses is saying. I'm not talking to you, David. His head snapped up like he was in trouble. Take heed in the plague of leprosy, that thou observe diligently to do all that the priests, the Levites, shall teach you, as I commanded them, so you shall observe to do. So everyone who remembers reading all those very, very detailed description in probably Leviticus about how do you discern whether it's leprosy, is the spot sunken, is the hair white, and all these different rules. Those are rules the priests had to know. Because it was their job when someone came to them and say, hey, I think I have leprosy. Like, there's no medical board, but the priest had the responsibility of saying, yes, you meet the qualifications, you have to go be quarantined. Or, no, you're fine. And so this is pay attention to it, and then you observe to do what they say. Follow it. Remember what the Lord thy God did unto Miriam by the way after you were come forth out of Egypt. Remember, Miriam and Aaron got kind of uppity against Moses and tried to say, well, the Lord's spoken to all of us, and Moses ain't that special. And God said, no, he's different. And while Aaron was the high priest and he wasn't directly punished, Miriam was given leprosy that day. And they pleaded with God to take it away, and he did. But for at least a week, she had to stay out of the camp. And so this is one of those reminders of pay attention to leprosy. God can use it as a punishment. So heed and obey, but follow the rules with it. Questions on leprosy or Miriam? You can find that story in Numbers 12, around 15, I think, if you want to see about Miriam. All right, verse 10 through 11 are linked. When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad to thee. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. In any case thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment, and bless thee, and it shall be righteousness unto thee before the Lord thy God. All right, so this is a very broad rule. It doesn't matter whether you're lending money, whether you're lending seed for planting, lending an animal, whatever it is. When you take a pledge or collateral and you're taking possession of it as a creditor, you don't have the right to go into that borrower's home and take the stuff. All right, so this is really borrower protection. That he has the right of autonomy with his house. You don't get to come in. He can go bring the stuff and bring it outside to you, standing abroad. Does that mean you can't knock on the door? No. But you're not barging your way in and taking the stuff. You're waiting for him to bring it. Now, it gets more specific that if he's poor, the poor person, was the most valuable thing that he probably has left is probably his coat, right? You don't have your quilt blankets. You don't have pillows. But when you go to sleep at night, you wrap up in your coat. And so you take that coat during the day. It says if he's poor, you can't hang on to it at night. You got to go back to his house, give him back his coat, so that he has something to wear and wrap around him at night. And because you're doing that and obeying God, he'll be blessing you, like praying, for the Lord to bless you because you have been merciful in returning his coat, even though you got to go back the next day and get it again. Now, This is a cost-benefit thing. He's told you have to lend to the poor, and if you're going to take collateral, you're going to have to go through this hassle every morning and every evening. What does that logically get you to before too long? Better just to give it to them. If they pay it back, fine, but going through the hassle of trying to secure collateral from someone who's poor, it's probably not worth it to you. And I think the Lord's designing it so it's not be worth it to you. Okay? It shall be righteousness unto thee before the Lord. That's the making sure that he's able to sleep in his own raiment, his own coat. Any questions on that? All right, so that's protections for the borrower. How about protection for your hired man, your laborer, your day laborer? Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy. Doesn't matter who he is, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates. So it can be a foreigner who's there working for you as a day laborer. It can be of your own brethren. Doesn't matter who they are. You don't get to oppress them when they're poor and needy. Well, what's an example of oppression? At his day thou shalt give him his hire. Whatever you've agreed when you hired him of, I'm going to pay you on this day, that's the day when you jolly well better pay him. The sun, neither shall the sun go down upon it. And you're going to pay him before the day's over. All right? For he is poor and setteth his heart upon it. Right? When you're working hand to mouth and payday's coming, if payday doesn't come, you have been looking forward to that is very discouraging. And in fact, he will be crying against that, unjust master or the employer, lest he cry against thee unto the Lord, and it be a sin unto thee. So don't think that you can change the terms on him, not abide by it, or jerk him around because you've got power and he doesn't. The Lord knows, and it's a sin for you to do so. So you got the protection of the laborer, regardless of who. This is a form of cruelty, right? And the same thing with the returning the coat. This is mercy. And that's a pattern that shows up about the Lord looking after the poor and the weak and the needy. Verse 16, criminal law. The father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. That's a good law, right? If you had, somebody who was a murderer, and you're trying to send a message to everybody, and you not only execute him, but you execute his kids too, God's saying that's too far. And that's not an uncommon practice, because when you read about the kings in Israel, the northern kingdom, when they killed conspiracy, they killed their predecessor, they also killed any heirs to the throne. So they're killing all the princes off too, so there's no competitors. And so if you're willing to do that for wiping out a king, certainly for a petty criminal. So the idea of, the guilty party has to bear their crime. Now, from God in terms of sending consequences, he can send consequences that last generations. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the criminal justice system of you as humans do not have the right to punish someone just because they're related to the guilty party. All right. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. All right, going back to mercy and justice. Thou shalt not pervert the judgment of the stranger, nor of the fatherless. To pervert means to twist or distort. So just because someone is not from around here, not a citizen, or because they're young and don't have a father, this is orphans, you don't twist the right judgment in a case in order for them to lose just because they're weak. You're not showing respect to their persons. Similarly, there's an absolute bar on taking a widow's raiment for a pledge. So up and above, it said if a man be poor, you can take his raiment for a pledge, but you got to give it back to him at night. There's no scenario where it is acceptable for you to lend to a widow and then take her garments or clothing as a pledge. That is, by definition, what we're going to say is cruel. And so it's never permitted. Why? Thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee thence. Therefore I commanded thee to do this thing. All right? So there was a time when all of you people that he's talking to were slaves in Egypt, and you had it really bad. So don't be so uppity that you think you can be cruel to the poor within your own nation down the road.
Yeah.
Hey.
No, when you were talking about don't take advantage,
Mhm.
somebody was like if somebody broke down inside the road, they were wondering what place to get their car fixed.
Mm-hmm.
You work for a place which is way more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this place is way better, cheaper than everything else.
And you lie to them, yeah. Yeah, that'd be an example of taking advantage. Or they ask you to tow it somewhere and you tow it somewhere else, and what are they going to do now? I mean, there's a lot of different ways of examples, but yeah. Someone who can't read and you tell them, oh, it says this, and then you sign them up for something and they've got this repeat thing that automatically drafts their accounts. And there's a lot of ways that people today still take advantage of the poor and the less educated. All right, finally, showing mercy. When thou cuttest down thy harvest in thy field, and hast forgot a sheaf in the field. All right, a sheaf is a way to gather up the grain and carry it out. All right, so you just cut your grain with your sickle. It's all laying on the ground. When you can't tote it, you grab it up in a bundle, you kind of tie it up, and then you can carry it out. Well, if you've carried out almost all of them and you've forgotten one, the rule is you don't get to go back and fetch it. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. So these folks would know that after your field has been harvested once, they then have the right to come in and pick up the leftovers. Now, there's still some work involved in that. It's not just delivered to their doorstep, but they've got to go out and gather. So they'd probably be pretty excited if you left a sheaf, because that's a big deal. In Boaz's time, he told them to drop some grains on purpose for Ruth's benefit. That wasn't a sheaf. That was handfuls of individual grain that she would have to pick up, and got a lot more than her mother-in-law was expecting because of that. So if you do that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thy hand. So this was conditioned. If you didn't do this, there's an implication that he's not going to bless your efforts, right? And particularly in farming, the Lord blessing your efforts shows up pretty dramatically, whether he's there or not. And so if you failed to do that, or rather, let's put it in the positive, by doing that, the Lord would bless all thy work in thy hands. So that's grain. Well, what about my olive trees or my grape vineyards? Are they excluded? No. Basically, same general rule. You get one pass at it. You can't go back for a do-over. When thou beatest thy olive tree. Why do you think you're beating your olive tree, David? You got the olives on the tree. They're ripe. You'd like to take them home. How do they get down? Whack, 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 whack. You're beating it. You're knocking down the olives. You only get to do it once. You may not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. So those left over, the residual, will be there. Same thing for the grapes. When thou gatherest the grapes of thy vineyard, thou shalt not glean it afterward. What's it mean to glean, Patrick? It means to go over it a second time. Right? You ever done something and you got most of it, but then all right, I got to go over it and get it perfect? It's that second time when you're going over it a second time and catching it all. It's like if you ever picked blueberries at grandmother's house, you're working on a bush, and you think you got it all, and then you come back to it, and there's another 30 or 40 berries there that I missed.
Come back and pick them.
Well, in this case, you're not permitted to. If you're the owner of the bush, you would have to leave it so that the stranger, those who don't have any land, and they're just staying in the land, and the fatherless and the widow, those who are least likely to have the means of supporting themselves, have a way to come and eat. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command thee to do this thing. So similar language about not perverting justice on the weak is applied here, making provision and showing mercy through, because God is blessing this new crop that they have. So it's all attributed to God. This is the land that he's given them. You're his people. And so he's got these people within this land that he is specifically telling you to provide for in that way.